So welcome everybody, and welcome back for those of you who joined us for the meditation in the first half of the morning. So welcome to the North London Buddhist Centre, and this is the second of our monthly talks in the new series of talks we're doing this year. The new series on the triple training or threefold path. So the triple training of new life, new mind, new insight, or in the threefold path known as ethics, meditation, and wisdom. Ratnaprabha last month introduced this new series of talks, and particularly with a focus on freedom as the culmination or end point of the path, if indeed there is one, but also something that we can experience along the way. Freedom from dukkha, from unsatisfactoriness, fundamental to the Buddhist path, very inspiring. So today, in this new series, I'm going to introduce the first precept, the first of 5 precepts. So the start of a series of 5 talks looking at the new life or ethics aspect of this series of talks. And so the first of the 5 precepts, the first ethical precepts, is love, kindness. I'm going to use those 2 words as synonymous for the purpose of this talk, love and kindness. And I've really enjoyed dwelling on those words and their meaning in the preparation for this talk, love and kindness. And but in Buddhism, the precepts are expressed in both positive and negative forms. So this first precept in its positive form, we tend to chant and to recite as, "With deeds of loving kindness, I purify my body." And it also has what we term a negative formulation of what to avoid, which we tend to express as, "I undertake to abstain from taking life," or that can also be abstain from causing harm more broadly. And in the Triratna Buddhist community, we tend to focus on the positive formulation of the precepts. And for the purpose of the talk today, I want to do that, but I also want to turn it round a bit to receiving loving kindness. To receiving love, receiving kindness. I want to do that for 2 main reasons. One is that experientially, when I was contemplating giving this talk, and contemplating that with deeds of loving kindness, with doing deeds of loving kindness, that can be really wondrous to contemplate, to do when we're feeling abundant and resourced. But when we're not, we can feel like we're inadequate to the task. So experientially, it might be a bit of a should, or I should be emanating love, but I'm not feeling it. It can feel more like a shrinking and tightening, and which is the opposite of what is helpful to us on the Buddhist spiritual path. So that was one reason why I wanted to sort of turn it around to this focus for today. But also more personally, because it's relevant to me at the moment. My experience from childhood is of being relatively strong, capable, and supportive. I've been lucky to have quite a lot of energy, quite a lot of ease. And it's been lovely to be able to be helpful and dwell more in abundance. I mean, obviously, like everyone, my life experience is mixed, and particularly experience coming from being a parent for many, many years. But I caught COVID in late May. And although I wasn't dangerously ill, I've got that sort of long tail post-viral fatigue, which quite a lot of people have at the moment. And although I'm loads better now, I'm still limited and still not nearly as able as I was. And what's notable is that that's very limited, not just physically, but also mentally and emotionally. But there's also the other reason I wanted to sort of have this focus for the talk today is simply that all of these topics, you know, the 5 precepts, they're all huge, and there's lots of information out there about them. So in a way, it's better in terms of a talk to simply hone in on an aspect that feels live for me at the moment, and this feels really live. But I wanted to say a couple of things in terms of context as well, and one of them in terms of context in terms of the ethical precepts within Buddhism, because we can engage with those at different levels, depending on our engagement with the Buddhist spiritual path at this particular time in our lives. So we can undertake them formally as training principles. And we do that to some extent within Triratna Buddhist community when we become a mitra or friend, and more formally and with an expanded list of 10 precepts when we're ordained. So I'm ordained within the Triratna Buddhist order. And so I did that quite some time ago, sort of more than 15 years ago now, in a formal undertaking. But for the purposes of today and for this talk, I want to put that aspect of them aside and focus on them more as positive values, quite simply, and how we can engage with them and open to them as positive values. So not worrying about how capable we feel of putting them into practice, not striving to do these deeds. But simply the sort of feeling tone of them or the concept. So even as you listen to this talk, maybe you could be sitting and taking, you know, a couple of more conscious breaths, checking that to some extent you're in touch with your body, and then even just dropping in the words, love, kindness, whatever works for you. Maybe that's an image. And just experience any response to those words, which might be a response that you get in terms of thoughts or images or a felt sort of kinesthetic sense in the body or an emotional response. Any of those is valid. We all have our own particular tendencies in how we experience, how we respond. And you know, maybe particularly noticing anything that arises in the way of relaxing, opening, or maybe there's a contraction, a fear. So, but just allowing that image, allowing that response, relaxing into it, just that sense of the simple, fundamental value, love, of kindness. It's nothing really to do with you, with me, it's just there. And the other thing I wanted to say in terms of context, being contextual, is that in a way this is quite apt timing because it's Valentine's Day tomorrow. But Valentine's Day obviously brings a focus on love, but it can bring quite a narrow focus on romantic love, which I'm not dismissing or criticizing in any way. But I'm just wanting to, as well, with the context here, to present the breadth, a wider breadth of love. And in relation to love, most of our experience or much of our experience will be relative, relational, in relation to other people. And that will be people we know, friends, family, but also in relation to people that we don't know, that we know about, that we wish well. But we probably also have, undoubtedly also have some experience of love that isn't relative, isn't relational to particular people or groups of people. Experiences just of love, kindness, being present, just being present. just experiencing it, bathing in it, whether that's in meditation, maybe in the metta bhavana meditation we've just been led through now, or out in nature, in music, just in moments, arising in moments. And that can help us point to the fact that the more we get out of the way, the more we can open to love, to kindness, in a way, just as the natural order of things. And I really liked what Mike Samba was bringing in terms of the practitioners of ancient times, and in their metta, wishing love, metta, kindness to the beings yet to be born, and those being us, that we can simply bathe in that well-wishing that comes from them. As the sort of natural order of what's there when we get out of the way with our likes and dislikes, our hopes and fears, or even realize that we were never really there to be in the way in the first place. Or opening to just being a deeply connected part of everything, with nothing in the way of open-hearted, loving response to whatever arises in our lives. But grounding back a bit more now in my current experience. So back to my experience of the last 9 months. And when I was reflecting on this in order to prepare this talk, the word that came to mind was humiliation. So often not thought of as a particularly positive experience. And certainly if I was to have thought, what would I really like in life right now, it wouldn't have been, humiliation wouldn't have been top of the list of what came up in my mind. But from a Buddhist perspective, it is really positive. And it is really positive in my experience now, in terms of how that is. And it is something that is actually incredibly important on the Buddhist spiritual path. And on the path, we often get what we need and not what we want, which I think is also a line in a song. So I think in terms of this sense of humiliation, there is an aspect of me receiving what I need, even if it wasn't what I wanted. So having, as I say, been born and raised with quite a lot in my favor, and quite a lot of strength and energy, I'm still, as I say, I'm a lot better, but I'm still only working sort of 3 or 4 hours a day and need to lie down a lot, and I'm losing fitness, which I don't like. But the humiliation aspect, when I was reflecting on it, and why does that feel positive? The sense is that it unravels habit. And for me, it's unraveling that habit of carrying on just in the same way at quite high speed. So there is something in that which also softens. I can't rely on myself in the same way that I used to be able to. I'm not as reliable as I was to other people either. And that's quite a big thing to take on board. And I've also been the recipient of and accepted so many both small and also quite substantial deeds of loving kindness. A lot of kindness, a lot of love. And that's in relation to all sorts of things. I mean, some of the things that came to mind when I was dwelling on that is, for example, including very recently, I've been, cancelling people I've arranged to meet up, and cancelling last minute because I overestimated the energy that I would have available, or I've forgotten things about people, or meeting up with people, all sorts of things. I've also been very poor company. It was I was talking with Dhammamega, who we lived together, me, Dhammamega, and Yasheng and Wana, who are online at the moment in a Buddhist community in North London. But I was, every so often I get quite despondent about the level of recovery that I've got. And I was talking about brain fog, and she was reassuring me basically that I'm a lot better than I was. And she was recalling early on where she said it was a bit like having to sort of say one thing and then watch me process that thought to see when I was ready for the next thought. And she was saying that the expression on my face whilst I was processing that thought was a bit like that, you know, when that really concentrated, when a toddler is doing a poo in its nappy and you see that really sort of concentrated expression on their face. So I'm a lot better now, but I don't suppose I was very good company when I could only process one thought at a time very, very slowly. But and also quite practical things. I was remembering one time last summer where I went swimming at Hampstead Pond. I would think about going for a wallow rather than a swim, but it's something that's very important to me. And then walking back along the path, I simply couldn't take another step. I just had to lean against the fence, and the friend I was with went and got their car and came and fetched me. And also, I was also last summer I went to Taraloka to do I was booked to do a retreat that went online, and I went to Taraloka to be there on solitary retreat and do the retreat, and which I was really looking forward to. But it became clear that there was no way I was going to be well enough to drive myself there. And Dhammamega just stepped forward and said, "Oh, I'll drive you." So she, you know, to drive me there and take the train back. And then I clearly wasn't going to be well enough to leave again either. And another friend instantly said, "You know, I'll come and get you." So he took 3 trains up and drove me back. I also went, I don't seem to have stopped doing things with being ill, but I went to the Buddhafield land, the wonderful Buddhafield land in Devon, when they opened it for camping in August last year. And that was similar. I got, my daughter drove me partway there. And when I arrived, a friend just said, "Look, I'll unpack the car, just give me the key." But what's interesting to reflect on as well, when I was thinking about this aspect of receiving love, receiving kindness, and how do we do it, is that I was also aware of resistance within that, even within those examples. So, for example, when I went to Taraloka, Dhammamega drove me to Shrewsbury, and that was like 1 train back to London. And she kept saying, "Are you sure you don't want me to drive you all the way? I can do this, I can do that." And I was like, "Oh, no, that's a step too far." I didn't want her to be put out. It felt too much. And actually I wasn't well enough to be driving from Shrewsbury, but I couldn't quite accept that. And I was talking this week, in fact, with Yasheng and Wana in the community about why don't we, why do we so often habitually not accept kindness, not accept love? And it's there's lots of possible reasons, and it's an interesting thing to ask yourself. We were talking, for example, about, not wanting to bother people, like that example with Dhammamega, or wanting to retain control, wanting things to be done in the way we want to do them and like them to be done, or wanting to be independent, wanting to be, or not feeling maybe that we deserve it or that it's too much. So I think it is interesting to reflect on why do we do that? Why do we sometimes not accept the kindness and love that is existent and on offer? One aspect of that I was reflecting on as well is that when there's a sort of energy and a flow to it, So when there is that sense of well-wishing or kindness or love coming in our direction, when we refuse it or sort of block it, we interrupt that flow. In fact, again, that lovely flow that Mike Samva was talking about in the meditation of a flow of well-wishing coming from the practitioners of old. But even more immediately, when that something is offered, are you sure I can't help? Can I give you that? What about that? Or people saying something that's kind, and we're like, well, yes, but, you know, there's a blocking of it. There's an energetic pushback, which I think is unhelpful. So ultimately, what happened to me, I realized, well, towards the end of last year, after a few months of this being much more limited and being much more on the receiving end of love and kindness, and not being the strong, reliable person I thought I was or used to be, ultimately something occurred to me, which was that I realized that I didn't have to be useful in order to be loved. And I didn't actually know that I even held that view, that I needed to be useful to be loved. And it was, so that's all part of that unraveling, to notice these views and unravel them. And it made me think back to, as well, to the funeral of one of my nephews a few years ago, Matthew. And Matthew had quite severe disabilities, learning disabilities and epilepsy. And he needed two people to be with him for him to be safe at any time. And so I suppose but when I went to his funeral, it wasn't really until that time that I realized, listening to his sisters and his mother talking about him at in the funeral, just how much he gave in terms of love. I mean, it very much made me think, you know, love in terms of love is what makes the world go round. I mean, there's one particular image of him. I think they must have been showing slides. I can't remember, or it was just an image I remember from being with him and them at some point, of one of his sisters blowing raspberries on his tummy, and him just bursting out laughing over and over and over again. But just really striking me that actually what he gave, you know, in the world and for them, enabling them just to be completely present in the moment and with that love, with that response of love. We don't need to be practically useful to be part of that flow of love. And also what came to mind when I was in the same vein was a couple of lines from a quite well-known poem by Naomi Shihab Nye called Kindness, which you may be familiar with. It's used quite a lot within Triratna. And one particular line that struck me is, before you learn the tender gravity of kindness. And I love that, the tender gravity. You know, it is really weighty. It is really important. And also that poem towards the end talks about, and then it's only kindness that makes sense anymore. And that makes so much more sense to me now than it ever did, I think, after this time. So I still have that sense of pride, of independence, but something feels softer, more humble. I mean, humble is one of the outcomes of humiliation. Perhaps there's a bit more rest, less tension, less sort of forward momentum, more ability to be present, less control and striving, and within that, more freedom. Though I can, of course, I mean, I don't know what will happen when I'm completely well, to what extent I will revert. So that brought to mind, so how can we do this? How can we open more to kindness and to love preferably without long-term illness. And I was aware, just focusing on a couple of things really. And one of them is to be aware of the resistance to it, of just being aware of what arises, what beliefs arise. Oh no, I can't do that. That's too much. And practice. So practice. If somebody says something nice, smiles, offers support, offers help, perhaps the first response is going to be to push back against it. Or to say no. But that's fine. That needn't be the final response. You can catch yourself increasingly with practice. So, for example, when I was arriving at the Buddha Field site to go camping, and this friend said, "Oh, no, just give me your car key." It was like, "No, I'll be fine. No. Oh, yes, thank you, please. Yes, good." So it doesn't have to. It may not be immediate. It takes practice. But it's something to be aware of. It's something to put into practice to remind yourself of that sort of positive, energetic flow that is created by the sort of giving and receiving of love and of kindness. That giving is stunted by us not receiving. And another thing I was thinking about in terms of also how can we do it is perhaps to focus on intention. So one of the things I really like about reflecting on the Buddhist precepts, the ethical precepts, is that there's a lot of focus on intention, the state of mind with which we do things. And obviously, the actions themselves are important too, because we can have quite good intentions or very good intentions, but perhaps because we are not aware enough of other people and how their experience is different from our own, the actions may be a bit clumsy or not quite right. But in terms of practicing this receiving of kindness, I was thinking it might be helpful to focus more on the intention behind what's being done. So one small example I had of this just this week was that I went for a dental checkup, and quite a nice, quite young woman dentist who I don't know particularly well, but she was just asking about lockdown and experience and things, and I mentioned I'd had what's called long COVID, but this sort of post-viral fatigue for months. And from then on, of course, I had my mouth open, so I was silenced. And she was like, "Oh, you should do 20 minutes of yoga every day, or take vitamin D." It's like, I do, I have for years, But so what arose for me was in a way like, frustration, and there is that sense of, well, actually just giving advice without knowing someone at all is actually often not a particularly helpful thing to do. But I could choose to focus on the intention. The intention was entirely kindly. It was entirely positive. She had something in her life she found helpful, and she was wanting to offer it to me. It's entirely kindly. So those were just a couple of things. I'm sure you'll find others as well, but how we could practice really being the recipient, the more willing recipient of kindness and love. With this sense of really tuning into that positive flow that's beyond ourselves. But anyway, it's in a way, it has been quite humiliating to learn this after, to be tuning into this, really, this receiving kindness after more than 30 years of spiritual practice. But anyway, that's, but as I say, quite a positive humiliation. So just finally, I wanted to say a couple of things. One is, well, so why does it matter? From a perspective of life and perspective of being on a Buddhist path. Why does it matter, this sort of receiving kindness? And a couple of reasons that come up is one of them, for example, is that without that tenderness, without being able to receive that, it's also harder to be compassionate towards others. So from that position of, oh, this is easy, I can do that, it's probably harder to access that compassion. And also, there's just receiving and allowing ourselves to receive kindness can take us out of that sense of a basic reciprocity, you know, that you do this for me, I do that for you, boom, 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 into a much, because that isn't the way it really is. It's much broader than that. Also, there is a sense perhaps that at the moment, lots of us may be a bit more open, a bit more vulnerable, a bit more lonely, a bit more at home, maybe more people struggling. So it's particularly important time to open to that. And also putting this in terms of the triple training, or the threefold path Ratnaprabha was introducing last month, and talking about an ever expanding spiral, so that when we practice this sort of new life, the ethics aspect, the love, the kindness, that then feeds into the meditation, the new mind aspect, which in turn feeds into increased wisdom or insight, which then increasingly feeds back into the ethics, the aspect of love, of kindness, and the other precepts. So it's an ever expanding and important spiral. So I hope that makes sense at some level to all of you. And yeah, as I say, that's my sort of offering in terms of the first precept, the first ethical precept, with deeds of loving kindness, I purify my body. But taking a look at that really from that perspective of how can we receive that kindness, receive that love.